Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are just around the corner and I cannot wait, but before we get there, I want to take a second and look back at all the past generations of Pokemon games and recap my teams throughout all these different playthroughs. I have played through pretty much every single Pokemon game at least once, and I have a team to go with every single mainline Pokemon game in the franchise. There's a lot of teams to cover, but I think this kind of video is really fun and pretty interesting. I love watching other people's Pokemon teams, their team recaps, different generations of Pokemon games. I think all that stuff is really interesting, so I figured I may as well do it in this video here. And if you guys want to see more Pokemon related content from me, let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and all that, because I want to do more stuff about Pokemon. I think that there's a lot of potential for cool videos to do about Pokemon. Suggestions, anything like that, leave them in the comments below. But let's go ahead and run through every single generation of Pokemon and my teams for them. Kicking things off, of course, is Pokemon Red. Yeah, the very first generation of Pokemon, I decided to play Pokemon Red. However, this was not back in the 90s, this was in the year 2016, the very first time I played Pokemon Red, Blue, or even Generation 1 at all. So yeah, my first experience with this generation is when these games were added to the Virtual Console, which I don't know why they don't do that more often. They should just make all the games available on the Switch. They would sell so much, they would make so much money, but they don't. I don't know why they don't do that anymore, but it was cool when they did that back in 2016, and I played through Pokemon Red for the very first time. My team was Charizard, Raichu, Mew, Snorlax, Aerodactyl, and Vaporeon. Some really cool Pokemon. A lot of Pokemon I've always wanted to use, like a Charizard, a Raichu, Snorlax I use all the time. Aerodactyl is a personal favorite. I like Vaporeon a ton as well. And yeah, there probably is an elephant in the room right now, isn't there? Yeah, Mew. Mew is definitely an interesting Pokemon to use on a playthrough. And the reason I use a Mew is because why not? I think that's actually pretty cool if you ask me. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but yeah. Okay, well, back in Generation 1, there actually are a ton of in-game glitches and manipulations to do a lot of crazy things without going too extreme. I don't have to use any external modifiers or hacks. You can actually spawn in a Mew to capture relatively early on in the game, and it's very simple to do. I watched a quick, like, 5-minute YouTube tutorial, and there we go. I had myself a Mew, and I did the entire playthrough with a Mew, and I don't regret it at all. Was it a very powerful Pokemon to use on my team? Yes, obviously, it's Mew, but you never really get to use a Mew in any other game, and I said, you know what, let's go for it. Let's have some fun with this playthrough, and I spawned in myself a Mew. So yeah, there's my team for Pokemon Red. I think it was absolutely a ton of fun. I don't regret using Mew at all, and that's going to cover the very first generation of Pokemon. Let's go on and move on to Generation 2. So throughout this video, there's actually going to be a mix of both normal teams and then Nuzlocke teams, because I do quite a few Nuzlockes on my own time. I think they're very fun challenges to do throughout Pokemon. I usually mix it up. If I'm starting a new Pokemon game, I go, do I want to try and actually do a Nuzlocke or just do a casual playthrough? It's pretty much 50-50. But in this case, I did a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Crystal, and it was a lot of fun. Also, really hard. My final team in the end ended up being a Typhlosion, a Noctowl, a Muck, a Quagsire, Electabuzz, and a Murkrow. A pretty interesting mix of Pokemon, but I gotta come clean and admit that the only Pokemon on this team that I have a pretty good attachment to is, of course, Typhlosion and Noctowl. They were there from the very beginning. The rest of them, I think, joined the team in Kanto. Yeah, I lost a lot of Pokemon in the Kanto region, in the Elite Four and Champion battles and stuff like that. My team basically got reset down to Noctowl and Typhlosion, and then I had to rebuild there to make a team to take down Red, and this team definitely did it. I would have loved to use some other Pokemon on my team that I was using, like my Heracross, a Sneasel, my Shuckle, and my Politoed were all fantastic Pokemon that ended up going down at some point or another in the playthrough, so I had to replace them with the team you're seeing here. And yeah, it wasn't bad. It was definitely a fun journey to go through, and this team was actually pretty good in the end. I mean, they did take down Red, so you got to give them some credit for that. So for Generation 3, I'm only going to be talking about Pokemon Emerald. I actually played a ton of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire when I was a kid. I did so many playthroughs, and I just kept resetting so many times. I don't even know if I have a completed Elite Four team on a Ruby and Sapphire cartridge, but I do have a very fond memory of this Pokemon Emerald team, consisting of a Sceptile, Gardevoir, Aggron, Altaria, Banette, and a Walrein. This is actually a playthrough I did relatively recently. I just realized I have not played through Generation 3 in a long time, and I decided to go for it and just played through Gen 3 with a very fun team of Pokemon I really like, and this is what we ended up with. It was a very powerful team. I liked them all a lot, and it was a really chill, cool time. I actually still have this save file, and I am sometimes shiny hunting for a shiny Rayquaza. I know the odds are extremely low, but every once in a while when I'm doing something mindless, I'll turn on this copy, reset my game for like 50 attempts, try to find a shiny Rayquaza. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet, or else I would be very proud and showing it off all the time, but it hasn't happened yet. Maybe one day it will, I don't know, but right now this is what that team is delegated to, is just waiting it out until I hopefully finally get a shiny Rayquaza, and then they can get transferred up into Pokemon Home or something like that. So yeah, that is my team for Pokemon Emerald, and I like it quite a lot. Next up is Pokemon FireRed, and similarly to the Hoenn games of Generation 3, I played a lot of FireRed and LeafGreen when I was a kid. I actually have a ton of different resets and files I did of these games. However, the most recent one of memory is going to be a Nuzlocke challenge I did of Pokemon FireRed, where my Elite Four team was a Primeape, an Arcanine, a Jolteon, a Dodrio, a Lapras, and a Butterfree. I like this team a lot. It was very interesting. A lot of Pokemon I do like to use, like Arcanine and Lapras, two very cool Pokemon I like a ton, but also some Pokemon I definitely would not have usually used, especially that Butterfree. I was just impressed the Butterfree lived throughout the entire game until the Elite Four. Yes, that means that it did not survive the Elite Four, unfortunately, but that team was actually pretty good, and I was really happy with how it turned out in the end game. And the Primeape actually kind of acted as a stand-in starter after my Blastoise went down. I believe it was to Sabrina and her extremely overpowered Alakazam. That's unfortunately where I lost my Blastoise, and that is where Peach, the Primeape, stepped up to be an absolute MVP. I have really fond memories of this playthrough, and it was one of my original Nuzlocks I can think of, and it was a lot of fun. Moving on to Gen 4, Pokemon Pearl is my very first Pokemon game. Yes, I did play a lot of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire and LeafGreen and FireRed. However, that was around after I got into Pokemon. In Pokemon Pearl, I kind of went back to play those. So Pokemon Pearl, like on launch day, was my very first Pokemon game, and I was ecstatic. And that team consists of a Torterra, a Golduck, a Crobat, a Milotic, a Giratina, and a Camerupt. This team is really, really weird. Again, I was extremely young, and most of these Pokemon were obtained probably illegally. I never used Action Replay. However, I have a level 100 Milotic that was gifted to me, I believe, through GTS or a friend or something like that. Also, a Giratina that I got way earlier in the game than you're supposed to. A lot of these Pokemon have really interesting, weird backstories. The only Pokemon that I actually trained and used myself was probably Golduck and Torterra, honestly. Maybe the Camerupt after I beat the Elite Four. Very weird team, but we're actually going to take a second to talk about my Pokemon Platinum team as well. I know I said I was only going to do one team for Generational Region. However, I'm going to make an exception here because this is actually a pretty recent playthrough of Pokemon Platinum, and I like this team a ton. It consists of a Torterra, a Luxray, Floatzel, Togekiss, Magmortar, and Dusknoir. This playthrough happened at a time when I was really trying to get back into Pokemon after probably a year or so of not touching the game at all, and I decided to jump in with Pokemon Platinum, a game I have not played in a long time, and this is the team I rocked with, and I like them a lot. This was a save file that I did basically everything in. I battled every trainer you could get your hands on in the game, every single trainer, champion, rematch, everything. And if you can't tell, Torterra is definitely my favorite Sinnoh starter, so yeah, I kind of have a soft spot for Torterra, and again, this playthrough was a ton of fun. Hot off the heels of that Pokemon Platinum playthrough, I decided to go back and play Pokemon HeartGold, as I have not done so in a very, very long time. And that team was made up of a Feraligatr, a Crobat, a Scizor, a Lantern, a Leafeon, and a Donphan. A very strange, odd mix of Pokemon. Also, the Leafeon was very cool. I actually traded my Eevee over to that Pokemon Platinum version, evolved him into a Leafeon, and then traded him back into HeartGold. And yeah, this whole entire team consists of Pokemon that I actually really like and Pokemon I've always wanted to use, like a Lantern and Donphan. And again, this Pokemon team just happened to be pretty cool, and it doesn't look too powerful on paper, but they handled themselves pretty well, and it was a really fun, enjoyable playthrough of Pokemon Johto. Next up is my playthrough of Pokemon Black. This is a relatively new playthrough of Pokemon Black, as I realized I had not actually played the Gen 5 Pokemon games in a while, and this is around the time that whole Renaissance movement of, hey, Gen 5 really wasn't that bad was going on around the internet. It's still going on to this day. People are trying to hype up Gen 5 like it was always amazing when people thought it was bad. And my team for this playthrough was an Emboar, Gigalith, Cofagrigus, Galvantula, Haxorus, and a Mandibuzz. Yeah, a very hodgepodge group of Pokemon, but really cool Pokemon that I was really glad I ended up using. Mandibuzz is the one where I was kind of out of options for a flying type Pokemon, so I had to go with something near the end of the game, and Pebbles the Mandibuzz ended up being that Pokemon, and I don't regret it because it was actually a pretty strong Pokemon. In fact, this whole team was actually really strong and very, very powerful, especially that Haxorus. I know Haxorus is obviously a pseudo-legendary, a very powerful Pokemon that I tend to not use pseudo-legendaries. I don't really know why, but I kind of usually don't, and I used a Haxorus, and I thought it was really fun. His name was Cashew. Pikachu, and he was really powerful, and I don't regret it at all. It was a really cool Pokemon, and I kind of wanted to use one again for my next playthrough of Generation 5 in the second game of Pokemon White 2, but I ended up not. My Pokemon White 2 playthrough actually consists of a Serperior, Ampharos, Excadrill, Beartic, Chandelure, and a Dragonite. A weird mix of Pokemon that I do think actually turned out to be pretty cool, especially the Dragonite. So the Dragonite was actually transferred over to Pokemon White 2 after I realized I still did not have a flying Pokemon or a Pokemon that could use Surf, so I decided to transfer a Dratini over from Pokemon Black over to my Pokemon White 2. I don't know why I did Pokemon Black and then White 2. I don't know what's wrong with me, but that is what I did, and I transferred over a Dratini to be the final team member of this playthrough. And yeah, these games are actually really great. I know people talk about it all the time, but it kind of surprises me just how well developed Pokemon White 2 and Black 2 actually are, and I really, really enjoyed my playthrough of this game. And this team, again, turned out to be pretty well-rounded. Like I was saying, though, I kind of regret some things. I kind of wish I used a Flygon, maybe, because I think Flygon's very, very cool. Maybe not an Excadrill, because I feel like I use Excadrill a little bit too often. Maybe I should have used a Lucario. A lot of questions like that, but in the end, I actually really do like this team a ton, and I don't really regret using any of them, because they're all very powerful Pokemon. I will say that the team composition wasn't great, though, typing-wise. That is a problem I encountered a couple times, where I didn't have a good counter to a lot of Pokemon throughout the game, and I was like, oh, man, this is kind of a bad build of a team. Like, for the early game, especially, like, grass and bug types, I didn't really have anything. So that was kind of a pain, but, I mean, I survived. I made it all the way through, so it's okay. The team ended up pulling its weight. And for Generation 6 X and Y, we're going to go ahead and talk about my most recent team out of every single team in this entire video. This is a playthrough I'm actually still kind of doing. I want to go through and do some post-game stuff, even though there's not a lot of it, in Pokemon Generation 6. And yeah, we're talking about Pokemon Y with my team here of a Greninja, a Charizard, which of course I Mega Evolve into Charizard Y, a Go-Goat, a Furfrou, a Meowstic, and a Heliolisk. I definitely set out to make a team comprised of Pokemon I really like in this generation and give this generation kind of a second chance, because I've never really held Pokemon X and Y in that high regard. It typically was my go-to answer of my least favorite generation of Pokemon. However, this playthrough definitely helped quite a bit, as I do like this generation quite a bit more. I do see a lot of shortcomings in this generation, but I do think my least favorite generation is Generation 8 now. Sorry, we'll get to that later, I suppose. But yeah, this team was actually a lot of fun, and I really liked using a lot of these Pokemon. I also want to say that Nuzlocking these games is a ton of fun. This team was not a Nuzlocke. This was not a Nuzlocke playthrough, but I have Nuzlocke Pokemon Y specifically before, and it was a ton of fun. I almost put that team on this video instead, but I ended up going with this one. But I do highly recommend giving those games a Nuzlocke chance, because it's a lot of fun, it's not that hard, and it's just kind of a cool game to get a lot of Pokemon variety. So there's my quick little hot take about Nuzlocking a game, and this is my opinion on this team, which is I like it. So there you go. Alright, let's move on though to the other Pokemon game of Generation 6, and that is Pokemon Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby. But I played through a very fun Nuzlocke of Pokemon Alpha Sapphire, and this was my final team. It was a Swampert, a Dustox, an Electros, a Bellossom, an Altaria, and a Kyogre. So this was my very first Nuzlocke ever, and I think it was a lot of fun. I really am fond of this team because it is my first ever Nuzlocke. I ended up completing it. I didn't fail, thankfully, and like I said, it was just a really cool experience. The team, looking at it, is very, very strange. I'm not gonna lie. Again, with Dustox surviving the entire game, I would have never in a million years expected my Dustox to be like a low-key MVP of the entire playthrough, but it was. Also, Electros, I just found like a random cave and it had this Pokemon in it, and he ended up being a very powerful Pokemon. Also, Kyogre, part of me definitely does regret using a Kyogre on my team, as it's a legendary Pokemon. It definitely made the games a lot easier to play through, I'm not gonna lie. But, you know, it was my very first Nuzlocke, and I caught it, you know, following all the rules and everything, so I was definitely able to use it on my team. But I just felt a little bit weird about it, especially looking back. So I kind of regret it, kind of don't, because again, it was my very first Nuzlocke. I definitely could have used a little bit of a handicap, and Kyogre definitely was that, because he was very, very powerful, especially going through the Elite Four. Moving on though, we have my favorite Pokemon team of probably all time. This is my Pokemon Sun playthrough, and I am a huge fan of Pokemon Generation 7. I don't know exactly what it is. I do have a pretty good idea what it is. I think it's just the vibes of Generation 7, the build up, the release, and all the Pokemon and their designs of Generation 7 are just incredible. I think this generation is severely underlooked, and my very first playthrough of Pokemon Sun is one of my favorite playthroughs of Pokemon ever. And my final team for this generation was a Decidueye, a Toucannon, a Lycanroc, a Vikavolt, a Alolan Ninetales, and an Arachnid. Arachnid? How do you say that? I don't know. But this is my final team for this game. A very interesting mix of Pokemon. I didn't really expect to use an Arachnid. I definitely was expecting to use a Lycanroc, Decidueye, and Alolan Ninetales, which are some of my favorite Pokemon ever. My favorite Pokemon of all time is a Rowlet, because I just think it's just a incredible design. It's an amazing Pokemon. I think the Decidueye is up there as well as one of my favorite Pokemon ever. It's just such a cool Pokemon, along with Alolan Ninetales. I was already a huge fan of Ninetales. It definitely is one of my top 5 favorite Pokemon, and Alolan Ninetales, it's up there as well. I think it's just an absolutely incredible design for both of these Pokemon. And yeah, this whole entire team ended up being super strong, super cool, super dependable, and I really like the entire playthrough, like I said, of Pokemon Sun. So this team definitely is one of my personal favorites, if not my all-time favorite Pokemon team. So I'm a huge fan of this Pokemon Sun playthrough and squad.
Okay, the next team we're going to talk about is my Pokemon Ultra Sun Nuzlocke team. Now, I wasn't actually too sure if I should include the second iteration of Alola in this video, because you could definitely argue that Ultra Sun is sort of like the Platinum or Emerald of the Alola region. However, Ultra Sun and Moon could also be like an alternate universe, different story kind of thing. Whatever, we're going to go ahead and talk about it. My Nuzlocke team for this was a Primarina, a Lopunny, Malamar, Dhelmise, Togedemaru, and a Talonflame. This team was really, really fun, and I actually ended up really loving this game because, again, this team was a really cool team, and I gotta come clean and say that I lost this Nuzlocke. This is the first and only Nuzlocke that I've actually completely lost. I tried to completely blindly play through this game, and I got completely wiped when I got to Ultra Necrozma. Yeah, it was an absolute tragedy. Everyone just got absolutely murdered. It was very sad. However, at the same time, I still ended up liking this team, and I said, you know what? I'll accept it. I took an L on this Nuzlocke. It's fine. Let's go ahead and just play through the rest of this game with this team. A lot of cool Pokemon like a Malamar, a Dhelmise, Pokemon I really wanted to use. I've actually also done a Pokemon Moon Nuzlocke, so I've used Incineroar before, and then I finished this out with a Primarina. And yeah, I like this starter a lot. Also, Togedemaru is a Pokemon that I usually would never ever use. Like, I don't like Togedemaru. However, it ended up being really cool that now it is my favorite Pikachu clone, even though I usually don't like Pikachu clones. So this playthrough was a lot of fun. I really recommend trying to Nuzlocke this game. Again, it's hard. Clearly, I lost. I mean, I'm not the best out there, but still, it was hard. So that is my team for Ultra Sun. The other games of Pokemon Generation 7 is Let's Go, and my team consisted of course, Pikachu, Clefable, Rhydon, Ninetales, Gyarados, and Machamp. I gotta be honest, I don't like this team that much. Like, I feel bad, but I really didn't enjoy my playthrough of this game. I wish I did more. Maybe I was just burnt out on Kanto at this point in time. I tried to use Pokemon I usually wouldn't use, which consisted of a Clefable, a Rhydon, a Machamp, and even a Gyarados. And then I made an exception, of course, for using Pikachu. You have to use Pikachu, I mean, come on. And then I actually traded someone to get a Ninetales because I was like, I need a savior on this team. I'm not liking it very much. I need a Pokemon I know I can rely on, and that was Ninetales. However, because he got boosted XP from being a traded Pokemon and the XP share was on, made him overpowered, and it wasn't fun to really use him anymore, so I didn't really use him because he could just one-shot basically everything. Pokemon balancing is bad. I'm just going to say it. Modern Pokemon balancing is terrible. So that was unfortunate, and it made me kind of sad about that. But regardless, that is going to be my team for Pokemon Let's Go. Pikachu, I feel bad that I didn't really like this team all that much, but it is what it is. I can't lie and say that this was the best playthrough ever, because it definitely wasn't, but of all the teams out there, it was one of them. Moving on though, we do have the latest generation of Pokemon as of the time recording this video, and that is Pokemon Generation 8. And my team consisted of Rillaboom, a Centiskorch, an Alcremie, Copperjaw, Poltegeist, and a Graploct. And I gotta come clean and say that I did not enjoy Pokemon Generation 8. Like, I did not like Pokemon Sword and Shield, just straight up. I didn't think they were very well developed, well made Pokemon games. I know it's a very controversial region for a lot of different reasons, but I just really didn't enjoy the adventure. But I will say that I did like my team. Like I said in Pokemon Let's Go, I didn't like my team, but I did like my team in Pokemon Sword. I just didn't like the playthrough, if that makes any sense at all. I hope it does. But I made it through Pokemon Sword with a team of Pokemon that I think are like the coolest designs of that generation, pretty much. I mean, there's some other cool ones out there I did not actually end up using, but Rillaboom's really cool, I guess. He's my favorite starter. I don't really like any of the starters all that much, but Rillaboom would probably be my favorite. Centiskorch is awesome. Alcremie is an incredibly cool Pokemon. I get why it gets a lot of hate, but I'm a sucker for this type of Pokemon, and I thought it was really fun. I also love my nickname Spumoni for my Alcremie, because Spumoni is delicious, my favorite ice cream out there. It's so good. So yeah, all these Pokemon ended up actually being pretty cool, and I'm glad I used them all on my team. It definitely helped recover a playthrough of a Pokemon game that I was not really enjoying.
but it made it better because I was using Pokemon I did enjoy using. And there's my team for the Galar region of Pokemon. Next up though, we have Shining Pearl, where I used an Empoleon, a Roserade, a Mismagius, a Vespiquen, a Magnezone, and a Chatot. And similarly to my playthrough of Pokemon Sword, I did not enjoy the game itself of Pokemon Shining Pearl. I had a lot of complaints about the game, especially the way XP was handled and the friendship system. There were so many times where I just got saved out of thin air because my Pokemon loved me so much and I did nothing to really do that. However, again, just like Pokemon Sword, I like my team a ton. I think this team actually ended up being very, very cool, and I'm really glad I used a unique squad of Pokemon that I don't really see a ton of other people use. I know, obviously, Empoleon being a starter and Roserade are very common, but the other four, I don't see a lot of other people use, especially like Vespiquen and Chatot, and I was really excited to use them, and it was a really, really fun playthrough. Of course, if I wanted to use a stronger team, I would have used like a Staraptor instead of a Chatot, but these games were easy enough. I didn't really need to think about using a different team, and yeah, this was my squad, and I really enjoyed using these Pokemon. I am glad I went out of my way to use them, and it was fun, just because of the team. Again, I think the team was fun, so it made the games more fun, but the games themselves weren't that fun. I know I feel like a broken record right now talking about the last 3 main Pokemon games, but don't worry, the next one is definitely much, much better, and that being Pokemon Legends Arceus, Arceus, whatever the heck it is called. My team here ended up being a Hisuian Decidueye, a Sylveon, a Hisuian Arcanine, a Garchomp, a Sinnoh, I don't know how to say that, a Weavile, a normal Weavile, not whatever the other thing is, and a Hisuian Zoroark. Now, I know this game wasn't really made for Pokemon battles, but my team actually ended up being comprised of Pokemon I thought were very, very cool, and I like this team a ton. And again, I do like Pokemon Legends Arceus a lot. I think this game is really, really good, and I actually have hope for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because this game was so good. And again, my team here was actually pretty cool. I think Hisuian Zoroark is definitely one of my favorite Pokemon ever. Like, the design is so, so cool. I've been waiting for a normal ghost type since forever, and we finally got one, and I don't think it disappointed at all. I think it is such a cool Pokemon. Also, I'm really glad I used a Weavile here because I think Sneasler is an ugly, ugly Pokemon, so I kind of rebelled against that and used a Weavile. Also, the Hisuian forms of Decidueye and Arcanine are very cool. Never used a Sylveon before. I said, let's go for it. And a Garchomp, because why not? Garchomps are really powerful. I needed a final Pokemon. Garchomp, there you are. So, there you go. That is going to be my Team Forever generation of Pokemon. That was a lot. I know this video might be a little long, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below a couple things. First off, if you want to see more videos like this, I definitely want to make a video about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, what my very first playthrough team is going to be. I can't wait to do that. I am genuinely looking forward to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It already looks so much better than Sword and Shield, so much more inspired. Kind of similar situation to X and Y, where I was like, kind of a bad introduction to the 3D era, and then Sun and Moon redeemed it a lot with a lot of fun new ideas. Same thing I think is going to happen here, Sword and Shield, introduction to the Switch era of Pokemon, and then hopefully Scarlet and Violet improve it. So yeah, I'm going to definitely do a video talking about my Pokemon Scarlet and Violet team, so make sure to like and subscribe if you guys are interested in seeing that, and also leave me a comment below. Again, I know I'm making you guys leave so many comments. Let me know what other kind of videos you're interested in, about Pokemon, about whatever. I really appreciate your guys' feedback. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Make sure to drop your favorite Pokemon teams down below that you've ever played through with. If you want to go through every generation, go for it. I think this stuff is really cool. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time, and bye.